Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Katherine Loflin.
I'm very excited to be here. I am so delighted when I come into a place and I see this kind of interest and reaction, because, you know, of all the very empirical ways we can study place, there are also things you just feel. And I have to say, I've been here since Wednesday night, and there's something here that's incredibly special. And I guess I don't need to tell y'all that, but I'm from North Carolina, so the y'all's going to slip out. I let you have yours, you let me have mine, and we'll be fine. So I'm touched by this place, and I know, and what I'm going to talk about today has a lot to do with what I bet is on your minds and hearts when you think about this place. Because love of place makes us do incredible things. It also can sometimes terrify us when we see what's happening. So I want to have a conversation with you all today that hopefully helps you walk away understanding your strengths, and more importantly, how you can leverage them to deal with what lies ahead. But any place that is based on as much strength as this place has is well ahead of a lot of places, unfortunately, that I get to see. So is Zach, Bonnell, Barbara, Colburn, Ryan, Crocker, any of those guys here? Anybody like that? All right. As another indication of how much places are loved, I sent out this random thing on my Facebook page, and I said, hey guys, send me pictures. I'd like to include pictures of the place in my presentation. And you almost shut down my Facebook page with sending pictures, which also tells me something very important about the engagement we have here. But so a lot of the pictures you'll see throughout were from those folks, and many others that I heard from who generously donated their vision and soul of place depicted through pictures. So let me start with first talking about what is placemaking. It's a question I get a lot. Placemaking is really a framework for understanding yourself first and foremost as a place. It's really about putting place at the center of a lot of the decisions and the things that you have going on and the planning you have going on here in this area. It prioritizes something that might be music to your ears, and that is, it commands you to prioritize what makes you sacred as a place and hold on to that as you continue to go down a path. It doesn't mean that we stop growing and we stop paying attention to what's needed to continue to be sustainable, but it does mean that we don't let go of who we are, and we don't let go of what makes us have the souls that we have as places, because they are the things that make us unique, and they are the things that attach people, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. It's not about ever changing who you are, but being the best who you are as a place that you can possibly be. You know, I do a lot of traveling and go to a lot of different places, and I can very confidently say that we're in the middle of what I would call a place renaissance, where we see groups, communities, countries, states, as in where I come from in the United States, people prioritizing place like they have not before. And we should have sort of seen it coming, because not too long ago, Gallup did some research and they found out that young talent in the U.S. for the first time is now prioritizing place over job. And when you think about at least how we've done economic development in the States, it's all been focused around the job. Well, times seem to be changing, at least in my country, where what used to be the industry of a place is no longer there. What used to be the center of everyone's life is no longer there. And so young people, as they go out into the world, are saying, you know what, I want to have quality of life. I want to live where I want to live. And if it means I have to get the job whenever I show up there, I'll do that. Now, as a parent or a grandparent, that might sound, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have plenty, what's your not too bright expression? Stunned, right? But as I always say, this isn't a course in doing what makes sense. This is about the realities that we're seeing and the trends that are happening now. We're also seeing something else. I think and I'll speak for the states, but I think I can speak more broadly too. After 9/11, there was a lot of conversation about, we're not from a place we're all Americans, or, we are a country. There was a lot of nationalism, a lot of patriotism, which was so critical and so important to us. But somewhere along the way, I think folks felt like they could not be as proud of a place as they could be of their country, And I see folks kind of swinging back to talking more about, not only am I an American, but I'm an American who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and this is why I love that place so terribly much. And I think that local pride coming back is so important, because what I've learned through my research is that loved cities do better. They do better. So loving where you live isn't just something that's cute and sweet, and aren't we glad, let's feel good about ourselves. It's becoming increasingly an economic imperative, which has been kind of a groundbreaking finding here. And so let me tell you what I mean. Let me tell you what I mean. Oh, this works. You click a button. Okay. So I was part of the Night Soul of the Community project, which really asked some very simple yet profound questions about place. And those questions were, what makes people love where they live, and why does it matter? If you've heard me talk before, you've heard me talk about how sort of Soul of the Community and my daughter and my own professional trajectory came together. When she was about 5 years old, she was asking me, Mommy, what do you do? I mean, I don't get it. What do you do? And I said, well, honey, I help places be the best they can be. I help folks go into places and help them understand what their strengths are so they can address their challenges and be the best places they can be so everybody loves living there. And she said, oh, you're a city doctor. And I thought, yes, I am, thank you. Which is much better than when I explained this when she was 3 years old. I was trying to explain Soul of the Community, and she said, oh, you work with dead places. It's not quite. So she's getting there. So when you hear me being called the city doctor, it's because I take marketing advice from my 5-year-old. But apparently it's worked, because as there's been this place orientation, there's been an increased need to better understand, what does the role of place have in community life? It's not a backdrop. It is a central character, really, to the story. So let me show you a little bit, and some of this might be hard to read, but if you listen to my sultry voice, you can also hear what the slides are also showing. What we were trying to do with Soul of the Community, and you have to understand, Knight Foundation is a philanthropy, private foundation in Miami, Florida. The Gallup organization, many of you probably know of the Gallup organization. They do a lot of research, social science research, a lot of polling. And what Knight Foundation was interested in really trying to fund, because they fund 26 places across the states. They funded them for 50 years going, spent billions of dollars in these places. And, as foundations do sometimes, they decided after they had spent all the money, hey, maybe do places really matter? Maybe we should be figuring this out now that we've spent all this money on them. How is place figuring in the big scheme of things? So Gallup had been working on similar research in the corporate community, which is kind of interesting, which is really around, if employees are engaged to their jobs, does it help the bottom line of companies? And they had 25 years of data, and they actually found the more people are engaged in their jobs, it eventually helps the bottom line of that company. They're more engaged, they're more productive. You can sort of guess the logic. So Knight Foundation said, well, we'd be curious if that also holds true in the community. If people are more attached to their place, does it help the bottom line of places in any measurable way? So we went about trying to study community attachment. I was kind of brought into this because I used to work for the foundation. I have an academic background, and basically we needed these two worlds to understand each other, the foundation world, the community world, and the empirical research world. And so I was brought in to lead the project to really help, not only with translation issues on the ground, but also to make sure that the communities themselves could use this information right away. So we started looking at community attachment. And a lot of people think that community attachment is about like satisfaction. Are you satisfied living there? And of course you can see we did measure satisfaction. But you know what? Satisfaction tells you if you're happy living there. It does not predict if you won't pack your bags and leave tomorrow if you had to, or if you wanted to even. Attachment is a much deeper rooted feeling about a place. And so it's more multidimensional, if you will. So it includes satisfaction, but it includes other things like, do you think this place will be better 5 years from now than it is today? Are you optimistic about the place's future? Because people who are more optimistic about their place's future are more likely to be attached to them today. So these feelings, about a place are very critical. Do you feel like it's the perfect place for me? Would you recommend it as a place to live? Do you have a sense of civic pride in living here? So that was really the multidimensional model that we were looking at with attachment. Now, social science is medium squishy at best. But if I went into a place and said, hey guys, if you worked on your pride, your attachment would be better and it probably would do some great things, people would be like, well, how do I do that? What do we do? So what we wanted to do to ensure that this data had some actionability behind it is we wanted to really understand what are the things about a place that drive these feelings. Because if you understand what it is about a place that makes people feel differently along these areas, then you come a little bit closer to having a roadmap for success and what to do, right? And even though these things are not completely concrete, they're way more concrete than working in this world. And if we can know how that relationship works, we could understand better the levers really to pull in places to help grow this attachment. And because we live in the real world, we also realized we needed a so what. Because if you're not careful, and I'm sure many of you have had this experience, these touchy, fuzzy, warm feelings don't really get you in the door at the Economic Development Summit conversation, right? You need something that gets people's attention. And we looked at a lot of different things. We looked at population growth, we looked at school dropout, we looked at a lot of different things. And you know what? Attachment mattered for all of them. But the one that we knew would get the biggest aha in the United States from 2008 to 2010, for sure, was an indication of an impact on local GDP growth. And in fact, what we found was that communities that had higher levels of these things, higher perceptions of these things, also had higher levels of local GDP growth. In 26 places over 3 years. So this wasn't one and out. And more importantly, it was over the years of 2008 to 2010. And if I know you guys get the, God bless your hearts, the American media here on your cable channels. You know what was happening in our country with the economy still, but especially between 2008 and 2010. So there was this thing where feelings impacted something hard, which was shocking. And then, if you look at the things that I've highlighted in red, we found that in all of these places, and mind you, there are big cities, medium-sized towns, small towns, the same things mattered the most for driving these feelings. So whether I was in Aberdeen or Wichita or Miami, perceptions of social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, which I'm going to talk about, mattered most to driving these feelings. These other things mattered too, but they did not come close to those top three. And there's something I want you guys to also see about this blue rectangle. We really, when you think about the community characteristics that we studied, they fall into two categories. It is about what your place offers you. What is the infrastructure available for these feelings to occur? But it's also about what we as people contribute to the community culture of places. So we're all kind of in this together. it's very easy, and I would be one of the first ones, as I was yesterday, to talk to municipal leaders and talk to the private sector and talk about how you structure places matter. But I also have to tell y'all, what you bring to the table within that infrastructure matters too, and matters in really important ways. You know, when you're trying to understand attachment, I was sort of picking on folks yesterday. I say, you know, when folks brag about their places, they never brag about how quickly the potholes are filled, except that group I was with yesterday. They do brag about how potholes are filled. I was like, you don't brag how quickly potholes are filled. And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, you do, but normal people don't do that. And when people come here, I mean, I've been here for 3.5 days, and nobody has yet to show me how easily and quickly, you know, the trash gets picked up, you know, by the garbage collectors. Does that mean they don't have to do that anymore? Absolutely not, because, you know, if they can get off the hook about it, they'll try. You still have to do that work, but it also means that the work's not done there, and that these other softer sides of place are something that we have to be paying increasingly more attention to, because there is an economic component behind why it's important, and a social component, and a community component, and lots of other things. So it doesn't mean that the things that we have done historically around development and all that stuff no longer matters. We don't do that anymore. We just focus on all this stuff, and that's not it. What we're trying to say, and what I would argue, is that these findings gave a place at the table of economic development. You could no longer ignore the importance of place anymore in this day and time. So let me just talk to you a little bit about each of these. This is so cool. Consistently, the number one thing that attaches people to where they live, again, in poor neighborhoods, because I drilled the data down to a neighborhood level, at a regional level, all the way up to the MSA, to a city level, these things didn't change. Have you ever worked with communication people and they say, well, nothing changed every single year, we don't have a story? Are you kidding me? That's a huge story. The findings were almost universal. And the only reason why I don't say completely universal is I haven't studied everywhere yet. So you can either take what I'm telling you and take advantage of it, and let me save you the $2 million that Knight Foundation spent on getting these answers, and do something with it. Because we also studied the entire state of Arizona, and all these things stayed firm. So the number one thing was the perception of social offerings in a place. I hate to do this, guys, forgive me. I need to say one more thing about this. If you changed public perception of social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, you see same-year differences in attachment. I can't think of any other social science thing that we look at the community level that is quite so responsive as that. So when you think about civic engagement, I mean, I did my dissertation on civic engagement, social capital. I love all that stuff. It takes years to build, and you cross your fingers that not one tiny little thing will happen and the whole thing is destroyed, right? Attachment works differently in our minds, it appears. So, and I saw this happen. If you can just change even one of those areas, the perception, you saw differences in the very same year. Okay, so let me go back to where I was, social offerings. So this is the thing that we consistently found as number one, as explained the most amount of attachment within people. Social offerings is about the opportunities for positive social interaction in a community. And of course, it's the things you would expect it to be. You know, do we have places for people to meet and gather? But it's also about being pedestrian friendly. It's also about, you know, how many boots you have on the streets and how comfortable people feel that way. It's these organic opportunities for social interaction that are also really critical, and how the community provides that infrastructure. Because when a place provides that kind of infrastructure, it not only attaches people to each other, it attaches people to the place because of the shared experience. Now, mind you, I said positive social interaction. One of the things that came out really clearly in the social offerings measure with our 43,000 people that we talked to is that there's an aspect of civility that needs to go along with that. So this is a picture from a Little League game that's posted to the parents. Remember, these are kids. This is a game. The coaches are volunteers. The umpires are humans. And you don't play for the Cardinals. I know y'all have an expression for take it down a notch, too. Let me hear it. What is it? What's the calm down? Oh, don't make your pee hot. See, they're going to take my passport at the border. Y'all are stuck with me. Okay. So anyway, it's not just about social infrastructure. It's what we do with each other within those infrastructures, right? You cannot just build social infrastructure, and you can tell your leaders I said, you can't just build, build, without caring about how the human interaction is affected within that. Because there are a lot of places where they have social infrastructure and things to do out the wazoo. And when you get in them, Lord, you don't ever want to go back. I lived in Miami, Florida for 10 years. I'm going to leave it at that. There are also places where there ain't nothing to do. But boy, do people love each other. And no, you go ahead. No, you first. No, you first. Aberdeen, Grand Forks, lovely places. Because they've gotten around the fact that there's no social infrastructure and found a way to really come together as a place. So keep in mind that the ideal is to build social infrastructure in a way that reflects the place, and we're going to talk about that next, but never at the expense of this, or vice versa. I get a little frustrated sometimes. People always think that placemaking means bike lanes and walkability, and that has a lot to do with it. But it's more than just, walkability. But to completely, then go back on my own argument, have you ever noticed, maybe you just need to come with me to the United States and I'll show you this. When you're in a car and someone cuts you off and you're going to, kill them right there, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life. But if you're on foot and somebody, the bike guy is coming behind you and you didn't, oh, I'm so sorry, that's quite all right. I hope I didn't startle you. It's something about when we have to look at each other in the eyes at a moment of stress or conflict, we deal with each other differently than if we had the choice of just, speeding away and raising our blood pressure. So it is something to think about how it is the everyday ways that we can be polite, but it's also these other vehicles of politeness that seem to come out within us as humans. So the other thing, the thing that matters second, so we have social offerings. The second most important thing for attachment is that demographics of all descriptions feel welcome in your place. And I use this slide on purpose. This is actually from, I went to Red Deer last year. Spent some time there, and this is actually from a park in Red Deer. I use this slide on purpose because when a lot of people talk about openness, they talk about traditionally disenfranchised groups, right? Okay, when we studied openness, we studied everybody. How welcome does everybody feel in your community? So let me give you some of the categories. Young talent, young singles, families with young children, seniors, gays and lesbians, immigrants, minorities. It was a huge index because the goal is not welcomeness to some. The goal is welcomeness to all. You want to create a place where everybody can feel comfortable being who they are there. And because we're not just talking about tolerance, which, what does tolerance mean? Tolerance means I put up with you. Openness means please come. It's a different level. A lot of our places struggle with this. Social offerings could be a strength, and we found that in the data. Aesthetics could be a strength. It was really hard for this to come up as a strength in a lot of places. So you heard sort of the list and the myriad of people that we asked about. So I use this picture to show that openness can mean what you think it means, but it also can mean the other things. The fact that generations can still live in the same place and have positive experiences within that structure. Okay. So any guesses on which group was perceived to be the least welcome group in the 26 places we studied over 3 years? Young talent. We're screwed. It was terrible. Every place we studied, Young talent was perceived to be less welcome than immigrants, than older people, than gays and lesbians, than families with young children, than seniors. I mean, all of it's bad. We don't want to think anybody feels left out, but no one saw that one coming. No one saw that one coming. And you know, when you look at that question, and the question really says, how welcoming is this place for young talent? I started digging through this data because I was like, oh my God, how am I going to tell these people this? This is going to, the economy's going to hell, and now we got this thing. So I started looking at the data and found something really interesting from a demographic perspective. When you ask people 25 years and older, is this place welcoming for young talent? And I talked to folks when I was in the community to help me understand this. I don't understand this. Because data is often like reading tea leaves. You guys remain the experts on your place and what's going on in your head. My job is to really have the data and try to understand it in the best way I know how with your help, right? So I would ask people, what's going on? So they would say, 30 years and older. I would say, when you answered that question about is this place welcoming for young talent, how did you answer? How did you come to that conclusion? And they would talk about the jobs, right? They would talk about the jobs, the good jobs. We don't have any jobs. The jobs are pulling out, blah, 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 blah. When I would get collections of young talent together, and I'd say, how did you answer this question? They would talk about the place. So you had a generational divide in even how the question was answered. The exact same question, the human mind split by a generation answered it completely differently. And so it was a really eye-opener and again reinforced all of these other things that we were hearing about young talent, about the prioritization of place and how younger people were really focused in on that. I say, okay, so aesthetics is also obviously a really important thing. And the aesthetics of a place is not only what was there when you showed up, but what you do with it once you get there. So this was consistently something that we saw after social offerings and openness is very important. And in a lot of the cities I work in, I have to make the point that I don't think I have to make as hard here as I do in some other places, but you wouldn't know it after, I don't know if you heard my 2 o'clock on-the-go radio interview yesterday, where apparently there's a lot of concern about the fence going up around the waterway. Okay, well, a part of aesthetics is being very careful with what you do with blighted conditions and what you do around doing things for places for their own good. So there's a lot that goes into that. And in the States, the unfortunate side of this is usually the first thing we budget out of our municipal grants when it hits the fan. Another expression, right? But we actually use that one too. You budget out the park system, you budget out. And what you do when you do that is you budget out the opportunities for positive social interaction, the opportunities for people to feel pride in place, the opportunities for different groups of the community to get together organically. You can't force bonding. You have to create infrastructures where these kinds of bonding can occur. And that's it's a hard decision, and it's exactly the opposite of the way I know my cities have done their budgeting. But new times, if it's new times that we all have to accept, it's also new times that they also have to accept. You know what I mean? We can't, the residents can't always be the only ones that are saying, hey, you got to deal with this. And, part of it is also that covenant with a municipality that says this is also part of the change that you have to recognize for us. So, and I'm just going to go a little bit longer because I know I'm probably already close to them wanting me to shut up. But, it's really important when you're doing this kind of placemaking work is that the first step is understanding first your narrative as a place. And you guys are so ahead of this, so many people. Because a narrative is really about all of your placemaking activities should be rooted in a commonly held and understood narrative about a place, right? What are the things that make us unique as a place? What is, to use a marketing term, what is our competitive advantage? Because there's a real danger out there of places somewhere getting the message that if we cookie cutter to be like somebody else, we're better off. You're not. Don't do it, please. You guys seem to be at a very important crossroads, and I deal with places that have already made those decisions. And I can tell you those that held on to their narrative and their identity as a place and found a way to honor it still as they continue to grow in a smart and sustainable way are much better off than those who turn themselves inside out to be like somewhere else and it just didn't work there like it did somewhere else. You are who you are, and there's not a damn thing wrong with it. If somebody tells you otherwise, I will come back with my data and talk about this again. In fact, your uniqueness as a place is the key to your sustainability. You know, I was talking yesterday about tourism and how a lot of placemaking conversations start with tourism. Do you know that the number one customer for the tourist board and the folks who do that stuff? You guys. Because if you don't buy it, somebody's asleep at the switch, right? You are the most important customers to tourism. And frankly, I can tell you, because I work increasingly with like tourism organizations, what people want is a place experience. Not everybody wants to swing off a bungee cord and go on a carnival ride that throws them 500 feet in the air. Not every place needs to be Disneyland. It won't work. I don't want everywhere to be like Disneyland, of course. So it's really important to really figure this thing out. And I think you guys are there. You just have to kind of organize your thoughts in a certain way because, frankly, we all know what it looks like when the offering doesn't match the environment that it's in. One of these dogs looks a little more happy with his circumstances than another. It's very symbolic, right? I don't want you guys to end up being, you know, in the Disney World swimming pool there. Because also, I mean, let's be honest, that is social offerings, and so is this. One of these should speak to you as more of what you're looking for, what you're interested in. This is also social offerings, a water slide down the center of downtown in Grand Rapids that they do once a year to celebrate the fact that they have hills in Grand Rapids and nobody knew that. And there's Grand Rapids Now to tell you more about how great their place is. Or what these are called iBars, interactive bars where you can get your stock quotes and you can play games and you can do all sorts of stuff that you would find in New York City. Those are both social offerings too. This is both aesthetics. This is both welcoming. So you can either come to Nanny and Poppy's house and get hugs and kisses and cookies and milk and we'll have a sleepover, or you can be a young talent showing up at Florida State University and told, welcome, you park in the wrong place, we're going to tow your car and you're going to cost a fortune to get it back. This is universities really trying to be open, but they can't help themselves, right? It's terrible. So anyway, don't get me started. I'm already over time. Okay, so, you know, how do you come up with your community identity or your community narrative? And we sometimes use those words interchangeably. It's really about the values and characteristics that you hold dear as a place. But it's also understanding that you are just not one thing. And this is where we also get stuck. It's not that you're just your history. It's not that you're just your geography. It's not that you're just your industry. All of these things weave together to tell the story of a place that you need to be holding on to. It's also about the people, the culture, the landmarks, you know, the anchor institutions, what it is that makes this place what it is, and taking full advantage of that. You know, I've seen a lot of conversations that are around development get completely stalled out. And you have the one group that says, guys, come on. If you want us to not turn into Tumbleweed City here, we've got to develop. We've got to go. And people are saying, no, never. What is behind that is a fear of loss of place. And nobody knows what the hell people are freaked out about. I know. They're terrified of losing something very sacred to them. That's why when you look at people, their attachment levels over time, you know, their highest level of attachment to a place is usually around the 5-year mark. And then it starts to go down a little bit. And when you talk to people who have lived at a place 20 years or more, you know what they say? They say one or two things. I couldn't economically leave when this place no longer served my purpose. I had to stay, or this place just wasn't what it was 20 years ago. And what they lament is not necessarily the building, but the symbol that it's become for them about a loss of something they held dear. So if you can figure out what it is that you need to hold on to and make a covenant with each other and your leaders to hold it sacred while you continue to grow and you continue to develop and you continue to modernize and all that other stuff, I'm not telling you you can't. But you can only do that through the vehicle of your narrative. Because this is really, at the end of the day, this is what placemaking is. It's about understanding your narrative and having it manifest through these three things that will give you the most bang for your buck, frankly. Coming to a place of optimized place. And if you do that, you will find your residents stay attached. You will find that people want to come and visit here and have the experience. You will find that businesses here will even want to do more with what they're doing. Because we find when people are attached, I should have mentioned this, they're not only more satisfied in their jobs, they're more entrepreneurial, more businesses seem to show up there, they're more productive. They also spend more time in that community and they encourage others to do the same. And when you have that kind of decisions affecting behavior, you start to see where the economy comes in pretty quickly. Okay, I am at my limit. I'm over my limit, and I didn't tell you any examples or any ideas at all. Are you with me? I'm never leaving here, man. Okay, all right. I'm going to do it quickly, though, okay? And we'll talk later if we need to. So the ideas I want to talk to you all about today is something important about placemaking. It's totally scalable. It's not a $10 million performing arts center all the time. It's not, $10 million in walking paths either. Because where I come from, there's no local economies that can support those kinds of decisions. So I've spent a lot of time looking at the lighter, cheaper, quicker ideas, one of the things we talk about in placemaking sometimes, that are really these resident-led, narrative-infused, easy-to-do ideas to just get things started. And there's a lot going on here, really, that probably would fit in this category. But here are some other ideas. And really, placemaking, when you see it in operation, usually falls into two categories. We're either trying to solve a problem or we're trying to really celebrate our strengths to keep the attachment where it is. So the first example I want to give you guys is from St. Louis. It's called Group Hug. Okay, getting a little flaky here, I know. Stick with me. This is really, this is how this started. There was a group of leaders in St. Louis that were on the pinnacle of starting yet another strategic development planning conversation. And they were all sitting in a room, and they were like, God, the plan needs to address this, and it needs to address that, and it needs to address this. And they were just like, every time they would go to these meetings, and then one poor soul said, now we have to do citizen engagement. I don't even want to come to these meetings anymore. How in the world are we going to engage the community around this crap? This is terrible. And so somebody else said, well, I think what we have forgotten is it's great living here. Why are we so deficit-based all the time? Why don't we just talk about this? Maybe there's something to be gained by leveraging our strengths as a place to deal with some of this other stuff we got to deal with. But I think we might have forgotten, and we certainly can't remember. So let's get the residents involved in helping us all start from a place of strength and having this conversation. So this is really about gaining attention and rediscovering your strengths. They started this Group Hug website, and they said, hug what you love about living in St. Louis and upload it to this site. And so people, come on. This is a guy hugging a pizza box, all right? This is a little girl hugging one of the things we have a lot in the concrete jungles that we've created in our cities and the states, of those water parks with the little water that flies up and then it's not there. This is a complete rip-off Disney World, but it's in a very tiny little spot, so it's not obnoxious, right? And it works really well. She loves it. There's a lady who was not hit by a car in the bike lane, but was hugging the bike lane. And this lovely lady having a very private moment with public art there up in the corner. It was incredibly powerful, and it created a new vibe in a place that was starting to just fade on the vine, right? And it became this documentary because they would have these contests to see which picture won. And the lady laying in the bike lane is what ended up winning. Because even though placemaking isn't always about bike paths, it somehow always starts with bike paths. So that was that. This is a problem-solving idea, which may or may not be as applicable here, but there's something about the simplicity and the notions behind this that I think would be very important to this crowd. If you remember, who can forget, Katrina devastated New Orleans. This is actually from New Orleans. And so when there was a lot of blight and a lot of abandoned buildings, boarded up places, cities do what they usually do. They started having all these conversations about how are we going to rebuild this city? How are we going to do this? And all the funders came in because everybody wants to be a hero and get their name on something. And they're like, here, what do you need? What are we going to do? So they started the meetings thing, 6 weeks. And Candy said she's an artist. She's not a community developer. She's not a placemaker. She's an artist. And she said, you know what, I can time it on my watch. In about 6 weeks, they're going to start asking for resident input, and they won't do a gosh darn thing with it. And what can I do? What can I do to create a low barrier way where we can start having some input here at this critical time at our community's life? So she created these stickers that instead says, hello, my name is. She said, I wish this was, right? And she started putting them up all over the place. And people started filling them in, right? So everything from a bakery, if you get the place, I will do the baking, a source of healthy food, a community garden, and some really cool ideas came up. Of course, we're American, so we had to be funny. I don't really have an idea. I just want to complain about the current state. Oh, well, it happens. So the word got out. This was on the news, and word got out that this was happening. And somebody said, why are we sitting in meetings paying people lots of money when the market is spoken outside? So they got out of their meetings, and they walked down through the downtown with clipboards, and where there was consensus, seed funders said, I'll build it. Done. Because the market, they're sitting in there trying to predict the market, and here's the market, right? This is placemaking. And so now Candy sells these stickers in about 30 languages all over the world, and all the money she earns on iwishthiswas.com comes back into New Orleans and continues to fund the ideas where there's consensus. So well, this is an Iron Bridge dinner. It's really cool. It's about using your landmarks. This happens in Massachusetts. It's a unique social offering that takes advantage of the strengths of the aesthetics of the place, hearkening back to a history that they no longer use every day, but still means something to them and they refuse to give up. Sound familiar? Okay. I want to thank you all for your attention and giving me some time today. There's always more that I could talk about, as you might be able to guess. This is a huge field. I'm so excited for you all, and I hope to continue with you guys on this journey, that you come out the other side honoring your place. Thank you very much.